Deer can be both exciting and frustrating. They can be very thrilling during the fall hunting season, but they can also create a lot of major destruction to your fields and forests during the growing season. With over 20 million whitetail in the United States, this increasing population can create a significant economic impact to row crop producers and foresters across the United States through destructions of field crops and young trees. On this episode, we visit with Dr. Michael Cox about the new deer repellent solution from the Helena Products Group. Trico Pro was recently introduced this fall, and early results are in. Join us on this episode as we better understand how to utilize Trico Pro and how growers are protecting their fields with this new repellent innovation from this rapidly growing deer population. Plus, Jody Lawrence joins us from Nashville to discuss the soybean marketing strategies for 24. Stay tuned for this episode of FieldLink. And welcome back to FieldLink. On this episode, we're going to dive into Trico Pro. You know, wildlife can certainly ruin your harvest, and there's a lot of statistics out there that often, quite honestly, get overlooked. When it comes to soybean growers, corn growers, cotton growers, and frankly, any type of grower, deer population can definitely impact your crop as well as your harvest. And with us today is Dr. Michael Cox, who is the brand manager for Trico Pro. Michael, welcome to FieldLink.
Well, thank you, Bill. Glad to be here.
Michael, let's talk about a brand that you just launched here recently this fall called Trico Pro. You had a great opportunity to get this out, test it over the last couple of years and see it perform for a lot of producers, not just on the ag side, but also on the specialty types of markets, the vegetable markets, as well as the horticulture side of the business. Tell us a little bit about Trico Pro.
Yeah, sure. Trico Pro is a repellent that, as you mentioned, we recently launched in the fall, September of this year, and it is comprised mainly of sheep fat. This was a material that really originated from European markets where over the last couple of decades at least, they have seen huge successes with this material, with a sheep material derivative and repelling deer and elk and really anything in that cervid family like deer, elk, moose. It's been a huge success for them in Europe, and so they introduced that to us and gave us the opportunity to look at it and vet it. And we've done a lot of research and looking at this in the field over the last couple of years, and it's really lived up to what the information that was brought to us said. It's been better than anything we've tested it against from a commercial standpoint, anything out there available to the grower or consumer market today. So we just ran it through the pipeline and development and put it against the best stuff that we could find. And it has proven to be a very useful tool that we can position in the agronomic row crop markets as well as forestry, Christmas trees, veggies, all over the country, all over the U.S. Great product.
Yeah. So, okay, Michael, first off, deer repellents, as you mentioned, they've been around a long time. There's been 1,000,001 different folks out there taking shots at creating something to, keep deer off your grandma's flowers, to off, you mentioned Christmas trees, off the forestry products, as well as, soybeans, cotton, and corn. Hot peppers, on and on and on. What really, in your opinion, makes Trico Pro different from some of the other, traditional products that have been on the market?
First and foremost, I would say definitely the odor or lack thereof is really what I'm referring to. Most common repellents that you would buy today, deer repellents specifically, you would notice really quickly that they have a very pungent, or I can't say spicy, that refers to taste, but
sure.
They're obnoxious odors,
right,
to say the least. They're based on egg solids or some type of blood byproduct or a capsaicin, like a pepper spray based type material And even to us as humans, they're very obnoxious, and you don't want to be close to the product. It's not easy to use. It's not user friendly. Trico Pro, on the other hand, does not really have an odor easily recognizable, I guess, by the human nose. You could put it. It's now to an animal such as a deer, which I don't know the exact number there, but their nose is multitudes more sensitive than ours. So to them it's different, but to a human, which good for us,
right?
The product is user friendly, and you can almost put your nose very close to the container itself, and you won't smell it. So I would say first and foremost that really sets it apart. That and the formulation itself. The formulation's very sprayable. It doesn't have the clods or the clumpiness that you would get with some of these other products that are very
settling out, and chunking up a little bit.
Yeah. Which this product's got to go through very fine nozzle tips, and it's important that it's consistent and that it doesn't cause you problems or clog screens or nozzles, and it's user friendly to say the least.
Yeah, I think that's really important. This product's really designed to be put through a commercial agriculture sprayer as well as a backpack sprayer for home use, or in the commercial setting in forestry and so forth too. Yeah. So it has to be, I guess, easy to handle and easy to spray.
Yeah.
What about tank mix partners? Can it partner with anything, or do we recommend spraying it on by itself?
Right now it's still in the early stages of commercialization. We've got more work to do on that front in identifying things that it can be tank mixed with or not, and get that information out to the field. But today it's not prohibited that you can tank mix it with things. But what we recommend is that you perform a jar test and look at the compatibility on a very small scale, and then maybe actually spray it if you're going to go on a crop that you've never put it on before, but it is labeled for that crop. Maybe you have high humidity, high temps in your area or whatnot. Test this product or test that tank mix first on a very small scale that's representative of what you want to use it for, and make sure there's no unintentional bad consequences or phyto that you may experience there. But it's not illegal to mix it with anything. We just we need to generate more research there and get those specifics out to the field.
Well, we've done a lot of research, as you mentioned earlier, and I know we had a trial out here at the Agri Center in Memphis, and it was a really neat story. I had the opportunity to really see this and preview this product in action a couple years ago when we first brought it to the market and started our research. But it was amazing to put those deer cams out there, and we had a soybean field out here where we treated, and you were very much involved with that, Michael, treated and non-treated, and really to watch those deer. By the way, the John Butler at the Agri Center International, who manages this 3,000-acre farm facility here, did a research with the state of Tennessee, Game and Wildlife, and the property that we're on here has a 7 times population for deer population versus other counties around here in the state of Tennessee, 7x. And we're still seeing really good performance with Trico Pro. Yeah.
Talk about worst case scenario, to put a product in there and put it under high scrutiny. That's it, 7x the deer density of Shelby and, all the neighboring counties, which if you've ever visited this area or you're from around here, you would know the deer density is already high. So imagine 7x, and that's what we have here inside the Agri Center.
It's a perfect population with the river, the Wolf River, which leads into the Mississippi River. Lots of tree coverage, plenty to feed on.
No hunting pressure.
There's no hunting because we're in the middle of a city. So yeah, the stars are aligned for that population. Let's talk a little bit about deer too. There's some fun facts here that we did some research on as it relates to the deer population. Today in the United States, over 25 million whitetail are out there, Michael. That's a lot of deer. That's quite frankly, doing a lot of damage. The average deer, I found this really interesting, they consume up to 2,000 pounds of plant matter annually. Michael, that's a lot of corn, a lot of cotton, a lot of soybean leaves that they can graze on for that 2,000 pounds. And the average deer, the average buck, now obviously depending upon where you're at, can range anywhere from 150 pounds to 300 pounds. Probably around that 150-pound range around here in the Agri Center in Memphis. But as you mentioned earlier, we get up into Wisconsin, into northern Indiana, Illinois, those deer can get pretty big.
Absolutely.
And the bigger the deer, the more they're going to consume. I mean, this is pretty basic science, meaning that average of 2,000 pounds could probably ease up to 3,000 pounds of plant matter pretty quickly. So that's the science behind things in terms of some of the challenges there. And this deer population is not going down, is it?
No. It's I think this is a scenario that's just getting worse, for lack of a better description there. Worse as far as agronomic crop production is concerned. Hunter numbers are not increasing. If anything, they're flat to decreasing, across the country. I did the fair share of research over the last year in that area just to figure out the market need for a product like this.
Sure.
And most states, not all states, but most states will give you statistical data showing declines in active hunter numbers over the last few decades anyway. And a lot of that's just got to do with other recreational activities available to people today. Rural land is somewhat dissipating from what it was, 30 years ago. You got some of the more active, I guess, like the baby boomers and some of the generations after them. They're getting older, and I read a kind of a funny line, but it said, it's a lot easier for a 35-year-old to drag a deer out of the woods if they harvest one than it is somebody who's 75. And so you get the activity level of hunters based on what are the interests today and the generations coming up. The recruitment is going down. So not the hunter populations are declining, and the recruitment is decreasing in a lot of areas. And then on top of that, the deer numbers are not decreasing just because we don't have hunters. They're going to continue to flourish and do what they do, which kind of compounds on itself.
So Michael, clearly the stars are aligned. We got big deer population. We got urbanization happening. So these deer are becoming more and more compressed. We already talked. They need about 2,000 plus pounds of forage to eat on to survive an annual year, which the average whitetail lasts. Their survival rate's about 4.5 years. As you continue to grow these populations, we're going to have more deer, and they're going to need more feed. And that's what's tended to happen over the course of 10, quietly, I would say. Yeah. And it's becoming a bit more of a problem. We're recognizing it now. Growers are in soybean fields and corn fields and cotton fields, so on and so forth. What kind of financial impact, what kind of yield reductions are you learning from growers, and what stories can you share with us from the field? There are a lot of areas, and I'd say ground zero really for this product hit mainly in the southeastern United States. They adopted this product, I'd say, first, and more in that South Carolina, Georgia area and cotton land. And there were plenty of fields where growers were giving us accounts where some areas they may have not even harvested in the last 5 years, because the deer damage was so extensive, and they completely decimated that cotton planting. And after using one application of Trico Pro this year, shortly thereafter planting, when the cotton had germinated and cracked, that they were seeing a normal cotton field. It was flourishing. It had plenty of growth, and they were saying, hey, this is the first time we've harvested in 5 years. Your product really works, and it works well. Financially, there are numbers all over the board, but we've seen numbers where in some years farmers spend as much as $2 billion reducing crop damage by deer, and that's also coupled with a few other species as well. But something up to like 90 million hours spent. And I think about the time wasted just trying to get deer pressure off of your ground. Right. 90 million hours. What could you do in 90 million hours?
if you weren't pushing deer off your properties or putting up fencing or doing some type of method to deter them.
Which is another huge expense when you talk about capital inputs, and that's just simply not feasible for a lot of growers.
Yeah. And I mean, in urban areas, you talk about Christmas tree markets. There's some economic impact data that came out on it saying, $250 million annually attributed to deer damage in Christmas tree markets. $250 million in a year.
Wow.
So there's huge economic impacts here with deer damage. And like you said, it's become more of a talking point lately. With social media, with video capabilities on phones, and it's just so easy to communicate and word to spread now that I think maybe that's attributing to the increase, of deer problem being spurred across the country.
Well, I think people are starting to recognize it as a serious problem. I can remember, Michael, almost 30 years ago, I would be out doing side-by-side trials when I worked in the seed industry, and boom, you'd lose, 7-8 rows here, and it was like, wow, that can really throw a plot off, right? Big deal for a plot, but, as a grower with a 40, 50, 60 acre field, what's a little bit here and there, right? When you're losing half an acre or an acre or so. But the reality is, as we just talked about earlier, the population has increased, and now that's expanding. And I would also add, too, I think we're becoming, more aware as growers as we incorporate tools like Agri-Intelligence into our platform.
Yeah.
And now we have some yield data that we can really pinpoint and go, what happened here? And we can visually see some of that damage where in the past we'd see green plants. They look great. I'm referring to corn here. It looks great. We got a great looking plant until you get out there and the ear's gone. Agri-Intelligence can kind of point that out to us.
Yeah, that's a great point. We can quantify those losses or really put the pen to the paper, so to speak, and we know where we started and we know where we should end, and we can track it along the way, and we can understand what caused the loss or the decrease there.
It's just more visual today, and as growers get out and experience those fields, and we're going. In a lot of cases, we're going, row to row here, row to road rather, and we're really getting up close, and we don't have those borders like we used to in some fields. It's making it a little easier for deer to get out there, eat those soybeans, eat that cotton, so to speak.
Yeah.
Now, tell us a little bit, what are you recommending, or what are some of your sales folks that are really touching this product? How are they managing it? Are they just doing strips around fields? Are they spraying whole fields? On the ag side, how are they managing this product?
Yes, there's really several ways you can apply the product. I mean, we're not really limiting the grower and how they apply it. There's obviously restrictions on the allotment of Trico Pro you can put on an acre in a year, and so that's really the ultimate cap. But we have growers that may have success with applying it as a perimeter spray.
Okay.
Where they just spray, and we're saying something around a 70-foot swath, whatever that boom is, but make sure it's somewhat around like at least 70 feet. But if they just make a perimeter application around that outside edge of the field, and if you do a perimeter app, it's probably needing to be something around that 1 gallon per acre rate. Does need to be a little bit on the higher end of that rate spectrum. But a lot of guys are having success with that type of application. Now, on the other hand, there are areas with extremely high deer densities and hungry deer. And I mean, there's many factors that contribute to the success of the product and how much deer pressure you're going to have, or how much of a pressure they're going to put on your product. But many areas, they go to a lower rate, something like 2 quarts or 1 quart per acre, and they may need to spray more of the field. I'm not necessarily going to say the entire field, depending on how big your field is, right?
Right.
But a broadcast application, and many of them are finding that the more area they treat, even with a lower rate, just that more coverage, they're getting a better effect, a better repellency from the deer. So it's like the deer are trying to get into a field that has a complete barrier,
right?
I guess you could say, versus a perimeter, and it's just the effectiveness, how the deer perceive it. Some of them are smarter than others. They figure out ways to get around the perimeter.
And they can get really smart really fast.
It's scary how smart they can be. But yeah, that flexibility is out there. Like I said, anywhere from a quart up to a gallon to the acre type application rate, and get creative. Some folks may find that they can kind of stripe the field. Maybe you do the perimeter, and then you don't want to spray the whole interior. Maybe you do a row, and then you skip a row with a swath with your boom.
Sure.
It's just whatever you find that works for you on your ground, your farm, your field, wherever you are. It's really up to that grower.
And I think, like you mentioned, it really depends on the pressure.
It depends on a lot of things.
There's so many factors here, but what we do know is the product really does work well. It offers up a lot of flexibility. Michael, are we treating every year, every couple times a year? If you're a row crop grower, what are your current recommendations?
Yeah, again, I hate to keep saying it, but it depends.
Sure.
A huge majority of the growers in the row crop systems especially are getting the success they need from just one application.
Okay.
Because in theory, if you spray it at the right time, before the deer really begin to feed on that crop while it's young and just breaking the soil surface, if they get on it too quick, it may ruin that crop stand, right?
Sure.
And you may have to replant. So in theory, what you want to do is prevent the need to replant. So you want to be late enough that the crop has come up already out of the soil, but it does need plant material. The more plant material you get the product on,
you need coverage, right?
Yeah, the better. So there's a give and take there. It's a fine timing. But if you hit that timing in a good spot, then one application could get that crop to a stage where the threshold is not surpassed as far as deer damage to getting the yield that you're supposed to get.
And obviously that's going to depend upon the crop. Soybeans and cotton might be pretty early.
Where's the growing point on the plant?
Yeah, corn might be a little bit later, because you're trying to really stretch that out because they're really going to decimate, the ears later on in life of that crop. So, and Christmas trees. I mean, that's a year-round application, right?
Yeah, and you're looking at multiple facets there with Christmas trees. I mean, deer will not only feed on those trees, those conifer type trees, but they'll also rub them with their antlers and cause damage. We're talking, aesthetics. In the specialty world or those markets, you're looking, it's about looks. It's about aesthetics, the appearance. So opposite of yield, it's all about numbers and output. Now we're looking at aesthetics. So you don't want the deer to touch the Christmas tree at all. You don't want them rubbing on it. You don't want them feeding. So you may need multiple applications in a market such as that. It's really a repellency game to keep them away. No contact, more or less.
Excellent. And I think the big key here is it's a unique product. It's not a fad. This is not a fad because I know we've tested millions of repellents over the years. This is one that's working. Yeah. Otherwise, we wouldn't put our name on it. Right.
This one is differentiated than the other ones in the market. I mean, we set the bar high for HPG brands, and it truly had to set itself apart for us to put it through our developmental process and commercialize it. And ultimately, we wanted to make sure that when we offer our customers a deer repellent, that it was the best that they could get their hands on. That it was truly a great tool for them to use, and it wasn't just another gimmick. And longevity is probably the name of the game in the deer repellents. Many of them you can apply and they go away in a very short amount of time.
A quick rain or something, or gone.
Anything. Sometimes it's not even rain related, but it can just be 3 to 4 days, and that's it. Yeah. This product, with appropriate environmental conditions, no big rain wash-offs or anything too extreme, this product in forestry type applications can last, upwards to 5-6 months.
Right.
And, and that's huge in some of these markets where their options are limited. The terrain is very harsh in the Pacific Northwest in these mountains where they're planting conifers. They don't want to go out there and visit these locations very often. Once a year they want to plant them and let them go. And the options are limited. They can either put a Vexar type protection system on those trees, which is very expensive and the labor is very expensive, or they can apply Trico Pro. The cost is 3x less than Vexar, sure, and it lasts longer than the Vexar does. Wow. So it's definitely a game changer.
Definitely a game changer for the forestry industry. And I think it's important for row crop growers to know that if the forestry industry that is a big investment in some of those areas, and they're utilizing this product and having success with it, boy, it's something that if you're a grower in Michigan, if you're a grower in Illinois, or as you mentioned, Mississippi and Georgia, this is something you want to get your eyes on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Michael, this past year, we got a fair amount of this product out, and it's before we even launched it. Tell me about the feedback that you received.
It's overall, it's been just outstanding results. There's always, no matter what product you're dealing with or you've launched or you're using, somewhere it may not work the way it works everywhere else, or it just doesn't do the job. And so you're always going to have that somewhere with any product. This product, I definitely think that we had less of the unsuccessful application type scenarios than many other products that we deal with, whether it's herbicides, fungicides, sure, insecticides, the failed performance of the product.
Something, Mother Nature, misapplication, something's going to potentially go wrong. But what I'm hearing you say with Trico Pro,
very little of that, very little.
It's pretty limited.
Yeah. Most people were giving us just crazy feedback at how well it worked, and it really surprised me. A lot of them were using such low rates and still seeing a great effect from it. The repellency was much longer than I would have guessed they would have seen.
Wow.
So yeah, it's been great from everybody who's used it, who's touched it. 99% of that has been just really, really great feedback.
I got to tell you, I've even throughout the summer, I took a few phone calls from sales reps and some growers, and they say to me, y'all been holding back on us. This might be the best product y'all brought for a while, but it certainly is a game changer. And when we have folks like that saying those kinds of things, it leads me to believe we really do have something.
Yeah. Well, it all starts you got to set the bar high to begin with. If we don't set that bar high and really vet these products and these materials and understand the market need, and what our growers need on a daily basis to get those yields and get their crop stands or whatever market they're in, their success is our priority. And as long as we keep our bar high here, then we should continue to get good feedback on products. But right, if we ever were to lower that bar, then the products will follow suit, and we don't want that to happen.
That's right. Michael, as we, get ready to flip the calendar and we move into 24, growers are thinking about their cropping plans and, where they're going to plant corn, cotton, soybeans, whatever it may be. There's some things to really consider and think about, and really sit down with their Helena sales rep to talk about deer and some of those impacts. Some of those hot areas, typically around rivers, creeks, where that population's high. But think about these areas that are pretty unique. I know when we were doing research this summer, as far as where could some of these markets really, really be, think about an airport. Mm-hmm. You there's no hunting around an airport. You have limited restrictions around the airport area. So if you're farming around an airport like that, or around a city, some municipalities where, hunting's just not an option to thin that herd down, Trico Pro could be a really good candidate for you to consider for testing it out.
Yeah. Hunting is probably the easiest and the quickest return there on management type considerations. In anywhere where they don't allow hunting in that adjacent few miles down the road or what have you, whether it's a refuge that's protected or sanctuaries. It actually opened my eyes. I'm an avid deer hunter, and I didn't realize that in many areas of the country that it was so regulated as it is, even around some of these rural areas where the farmer's like, hey, the deer are decimating my soybeans, and this neighboring 30,000 acres, they don't allow hunting, but it's not even urbanized. It's not,
right.
It's just a large sanctuary there. And I didn't realize there was as much of that across the country as it really is. So yeah, it's all these obstacles are compounding on themselves when you talk about no hunting and urbanization and moving in their natural lands and just their growing population and the hunter numbers going down. All of this is snowballing.
Right.
And so I think that growers definitely need to consider how a product like Trico Pro maybe could help them establish crops in areas where they've got high deer densities. Cover cropping, a lot of times it's a popular practice, and especially in areas where we're dealing with erosion control and even weed issues in a lot of areas, it helps with it. But cover crops can attract deer.
Right.
And keep them there all year, because deer are also attracted to legumes, which many of our cover crops are legumes or they're cereal grain type grasses. And, that's what we plant for food plots in the hunting world. So,
right.
Again,
more feed to feed that 2,000 pounds of feed source for that deer. And we're just making it really easy for them with cover crops. So, certainly, agronomically, absolutely, there's a lot of good there, but boy, when it comes to the deer population management, we become a little bit more limited.
Yeah.
Well, Michael, when we think about Trico Pro, I think the take-home points for our listeners here is it's convenient, it's effective, and it's readily available. Mm-hmm. There's really not a tremendous amount of restrictions with this product. Certainly, we want people to read the label and understand it. Mm-hmm. Far as products go, it's pretty safe. Again, read the label, know what you're getting into, but it's a pretty flexible product.
Yeah, absolutely. Flexible is definitely a descriptor I would give it as repellents go. No obnoxious smell that you would normally run into. No application issues that you would typically find with medium repellents, and it actually works. Yeah. And it can last a long time. So yeah, it's game changer.
We certainly want to encourage growers, listeners out there that believe they have a deer problem. Boy, talk to your Helena representative about Trico Pro. There's a lot to learn about this product. But boy, oh boy, as we mentioned earlier, for a product coming right out of the gate, we've had phenomenal response from farmers, from foresters, and even our own internal people who can sometimes be very, very, they want to be critical because they want to ensure that their customers are getting the best product and the best value for their farm and their investment.
Set the bar high.
You bet. Dr. Michael Cox, I want to thank you for joining us here today to talk about Trico Pro. So our listeners don't let wildlife ruin their harvest in 2024. And welcome back to FieldLink. We're going to head on over to Nashville to catch up with Jody Lawrence. Jody, welcome back to FieldLink.
Well, thank you, Bill. I hope everybody had a very drama-free and filling Thanksgiving extended break, coming back into some colder weather here in the U.S. as harvest finishes up. Everything's just about to the finish line, past 96%. But certainly hope everybody is ready for just a good holiday season this year with without a lot of stress.
That's right, Jody. Harvest is kind of wrapped up over a bunch of the U.S. Everybody had their turkey fill, and now we're kind of pointing towards the holiday of Christmas, and then of course flipping that calendar to the new year. And with the new year comes a whole lot of different marketing decisions for growers to be making. But before we deep dive there, what's happening in the marketplace? It just seems really kind of quiet right now.
When you get past the November report, the markets, just simply the news flow gets really quiet because the USDA won't make any major announcements as far as this year's crop, the 2023 crop, until the January final report. So, other than just the daily sales reports that pop up from time to time, and fortunately, China has been buying a good bit of beans. They've been on a tear lately, worried about the production coming out of Brazil. It's a quieter time, and the tough part about this time of year is bulls and rallies need news almost every day to keep that trend alive, where the bears are able to, and the bear trends that we've been in since the November report raised the corn yield. You see corn slipping down to 3-year lows yesterday and making down a couple cents today. That it's very difficult to turn any trend around right now if South America is having normal weather. But fortunately, not for them, but in the big picture for U.S. productivity, profitability, they are having some trouble in northern Brazil. They've had a really weak monsoon season. They're coming in dry. It's so dry that harvest is about 15% behind normal, about 10 points. And that leads into this bean crop, leads into the safrinha planting in January, February. And then if that gets delayed, they end up same issues happen in the United States. If you have delayed planting, you push pollination into the hotter, drier time of the year. So the big issue right now is people are watching Brazil, because if they continue to be stressed and feel like they're losing production, then the other domino in that chain is China coming to the U.S. to buy replacement bushels, whether it's corn, beans. We've even done a little wheat business with them out of the Pacific Northwest over the past couple of weeks. That is unusual. But that's really the big news right now. It's nice to see that you've got some calming tensions in the Gaza Strip over what has happened over the last 30 days. The ceasefire's gone on, so that certainly has spilled over into the energy markets as one input. And you have crude down to $75 a barrel, and you have December futures at $2.79 a gallon. That it doesn't look like this is going to spread to a more Muslim versus Jewish or Christian type conflict. So because we've got crude oil, and the big kind of overwhelming concern is this, that the inflation numbers out of the U.S. have been coming in at or below target for what the Federal Reserve has been trying to do with the rate cuts in curbing inflation, and the rest of the world is feeling that pinch a little bit of a slowing world economy and a slowing U.S. economy, that some type of recession, be it mild or be it a soft landing in 2024. You look at the demand outlook for a lot of these different raw materials, and you can see the impact of that concern of a 2024 worldwide demand slowdown.
Yeah, definitely slowing down. And you said a mouthful there when you talked about the bulls. And I've always heard the line, you got to feed the bull to get a bull rally. And there's just not a lot happening, really, when you peel that onion back. You referenced Brazil, certainly some things happening down there, but calming down there in terms of weather. And of course, the Middle East calming down for now, and slowing some things down there. But Jody, as growers get ready to flip the calendar and start thinking about what am I going to put in the ground next year? What are some strategies that growers can take a look at? We talked a little bit about Brazil, kind of the shakeup there with soybeans. It feels like the soybean thing. There's still a pretty strong demand for some soybeans. Some reports on soybean meal, and as well as a lot of plants are coming on coming on online here for oil. What's your insight? What's your thoughts around strategy for soybeans for 24?
That's a great question to consider because right now, as everybody is closing up the books on 23, looking ahead to 2024, how are you managing your cash flow for your taxes for the next 30 days? Then how are you preparing to either take your checks in 24 or what checks to write, what checks to receive? This always becomes a little bit of a dance over the next month, but right now, what we're seeing is the trend is that the demand profile for beans worldwide is going to be larger than what it looks like total world production is going to be. So we expect in the United States that there could be at least a 2 to 3 million acre shift of beans going into corn or coming out of corn into beans next year, potentially even 4 million acres, depending on how the next 6 weeks kind of sets up with Brazil's weather and the potential of a rally there, simply because you look at the livestock numbers in China, we'll start there, that they are back to pre-ASF numbers, which was 2018, so you're 2 years before COVID there, on their hog herd numbers. So that their demand is enormous, that it's so large that they're having to support their internal hog prices, which doesn't help the hog producers because our exports will be hurt. But it does tell you that they're going to need an awful lot of bean meal, an awful lot of corn to feed their livestock industry. And China always makes reference that they want to expand it and become a larger domestic producer of everything, whether it is meat-based protein or plant-based protein. So we feel like that meal demand, and we've seen it because meal has run to a new 3-year high. Crush margins have been incredibly profitable for world and domestic crush operators and crush facilities over the last 6 to 8 weeks, and the demand for meal worldwide has been really good. While the U.S. Will just stay on the livestock numbers, the U.S. herds are growing a little bit, and we can see that in cattle. Cattle have had a very unfortunate last couple of weeks where everything was bullish, 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 and then it's hard to find another market that's been hit harder, that's gone from incredibly red hot bullish late summer to just in an absolute free fall for what appears to be, very, you wouldn't call it an event driven rally. It was just the end of a big bull market. So that for those prices to fall, that you have some expansion in the U.S. livestock herd. It is going to be interesting how that reflects out in 24, because now prices are so low, you've got herd liquidation. So the cattle industry and the hog industry are going to be interesting to watch from a demand aspect for bean meal, corn, other feed sources. And then to tie on to the bean demand, you've had several of the biodiesel new crush facilities come online in since September, and they're anticipating 10 to 12 more of them being finished in the first half of 2024. And we've talked about this briefly before, but we were fortunate to go to a meeting where a crush facility owner spoke, and the facility's right next to one of Helena's retail locations. And there are 3 opening within about a 200-mile radius, and maybe even a smaller radius in north central Nebraska, and they're each going to need 50,000 bushels a week to meet capacity. And by the time you start taking that to kind of an exponential was not just a times three number, it's a times 20 number. When you take that out to 1 million bushels a week extra already in the system, the bean demand is going to be something very close to watch. And it's hard to imagine that all of a sudden they can end that demand, because all of these companies, whether they're the oil companies or private investors, have invested hundreds of millions of dollars to put these facilities together. They're getting enormous tax breaks as a green energy source. So we really feel like the demand for bean oil, the demand for beans, and then on the back of it, the demand for bean meal through the feed industry is going to be the biggest driver that we see. Unfortunately, while our prices are competitive in the world, we've got plenty of corn. Even with the crop coming in a little at a 173, the world has plenty of corn in between us and Brazil, and Russia's wheat crop seems to be getting bigger every time they put out a public announcement about the crop size, and Russia has just completely dominated the world wheat market on price and kept us, while we're competitive, by the time you figure in taxes and shipping and everything else, it's just cheaper for everybody to get it through Russia. So I think what we saw, and this goes back to, you got to spread some blame across the entire industry. The Russian invasion of Ukraine was looked at as going to be an enormous disruptor in world grain flows, and it just hasn't happened. We're back to well below pre-invasion prices on wheat and corn. And if the Ukraine is going to be able to find their sources out, and Russia is going to have no problems getting their bushels out, we're right back where we started. And then it simply becomes a simple supply and demand issue, where the world is outproducing us in corn and wheat at a time where we're heading into, probably in the grain sector, slower world demand.
Yeah, slower demand. And you referenced quite a lot here on the livestock side domestically. You touched on the cattle herd situation, the numbers there, what's going on in the cattle industry. Some of the herd numbers are at some of the lowest from, I saw a report, I believe, back to the 70s even. So just overall herd numbers are certainly not there. So looking forward, where's that where's the corn going to go? You can't just flip a switch on and change your herd overnight, like other species like hogs and chickens, so forth, that can turn a lot quicker. You've got a 10 to 14 month delay there with cattle.
Yeah, and I think you've got to look out. There are two sides to this. The demand side for 2024 from the feed demand side from the U.S. herd is probably going to be less than it has been. But it also, you have to look at that as a positive. If you are raising cattle and looking at buying feeders right now, in that the long play that the entire cattle industry has to do, it's like you said, it's a minimum year before you can really make a huge difference in the number on feed and what's marketed and what's placed. So I would expect from here, and take this with a grain of salt, because I certainly didn't see the collapse in cattle coming, but I can see cattle prices certainly becoming better and rallying into the first couple quarters of 2024.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree with that. I think, the palate there, the American consumer is still, they're not backing off on beef by any means. We've seen a pretty good trend there. But you touched on the overall economy. There's the average consumer is just not feeling it in their pocketbook. I mean, they don't have the resources like they did 14, 18, 24 months ago. So when they step into that grocery store, they got to dig a little deeper, make some tougher choices.
Yeah, the hard reality of the mailbox money for a lot of the U.S. population is certainly hitting a lot of the demand things that we're seeing, whether it's on the food side or on the retail side heading into the Christmas season.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Jody, thanks for sharing some strategy as we get ready for, getting ready. We're not there yet. We're 30 days out from flipping that calendar to the new year. But as you mentioned earlier, it's time for growers to start calculating, their yields and getting some strategy together for the beginning of the new year.
Yeah, and for next year, we've got a little bit of conflicting information on what the input costs are going to be. We don't see any dramatic increases, and certainly the markets are far less volatile than they have been over the last 2 years. But when you look at December 24 corn at 504 and November 24 beans trading at 1290, you've got prices that you've got to start putting some pen to paper on getting prepay quotes, getting bid sheets together so that if normal yields and rents and land opportunity cost and everything else that you figure into this, if you want to sell some, 504 compared to what we've had the last couple of years doesn't sound like a great price. But if you're making money, it's a really good price. And the same with beans. While a little more favorable to a bean rally, we certainly can see if we get, and it's crazy to think, but the February intention numbers is right at 3 months away, and that's going to have a huge impact in what goes on. So we've got several different things that will develop over the next 2-3 months. Brazil's crop, the number one, that are going to affect everybody's decisions in 2024 in the Northern Hemisphere.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think, I guess some of the best advice that I think you and I both can probably share with growers that are listening out there is to catch up with your Helena rep and start making your plan. Start developing that cropping plan for 24 so that you can make some great decisions based on the economics that are in front of you and take a good look at some of these opportunities that are, as you mentioned, things are stabilizing on the input side. And it's a pretty good time to put a plan together.
I agree. And that's the good advice I've got. And we can talk a little more strategy because the news will stay slow on the next couple podcasts in December. So we'll talk some strategy on that and even looking at the big picture of how to handle 23 crop and what to do looking ahead to 24 crop.
All right, Jody. Jody Lawrence joining us from Nashville. Jody, thanks for joining us here on this episode of FieldLink.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of FieldLink. Be sure to subscribe to the FieldLink podcast wherever you get your podcasts or follow us on one of our social media platforms at Helena Agri. Be sure to ask your Helena representative if Trico Pro is right for your farm.